The dusty streets of Oroville, California, had never been kind to Grace Garrett. But the spring of 1882 brought a particular cruelty that seemed to seep into her very bones as she walked past the mercantile where three young women huddled together, their whispers carrying just far enough for her to hear every poisoned word about her plain face and mannish frame. Grace kept her eyes forward, her calloused hands clutching the basket of eggs she hoped to trade for flour and sugar. At 22 years old, she had learned to expect rejection, but familiarity did not make it hurt any less. Her reflection in the storefront window showed her what everyone else saw. A tall woman with angular features, sun-darkened skin from working outdoors, and hair the color of dishwater that refused to curl no matter how much she tried. She had her mother's strong jaw and her father's prominent nose, a combination that had never inspired poetry or second glances. "Did you see her trying to pretty herself up for the church social last month?" one of the women said, loud enough now that Grace knew it was intentional. "Like putting a ribbon on a mule." The laughter that followed made Grace's chest tighten, but she pushed through the mercantile door with her head high. Mr. Patterson behind the counter gave her a sympathetic smile that somehow made everything worse. Pity was just another flavor of rejection. "Morning, Miss Garrett. What can I do for you today? Need to trade these eggs for supplies if the offer still stands." Her voice came out steady, which felt like a small victory. As Mr. Patterson examined the eggs and began gathering her requested items, Grace noticed a posting on the community board near the door. Her eyes skimmed past the usual notices about cattle auctions and wanted men until landing on something different. Housekeeper wanted. Room and board provided. Cooking and basic ranch maintenance. Apply at the Everett Ranch, 10 miles north of town. "That posting been up long?" Grace asked, nodding toward the board. Mr. Patterson glanced over and shook his head. "Owen Everett just brought it in yesterday." "Man keeps to himself mostly, but he's fair from what folks say. Lost his last housekeeper when she married that railroad fellow and moved to Sacramento. He's been managing alone for near 6 months now, but I reckon a ranch that size needs more than one set of hands." Grace felt something stir in her chest, something dangerous and hopeful. A position that far from town meant escape from the daily humiliation, from the constant reminder that she was not wanted in any way that mattered. She could work, and work hard. That had always been her single reliable talent. "He particular about who applies?" "Didn't say. Just said he needed someone reliable who was not afraid of hard work." Mr. Patterson handed over her supplies with a knowing look. "You thinking of applying?" "Maybe I am." The three women from outside entered the store in a flutter of pastel skirts and perfume, their conversation dying the moment they saw Grace. She took her supplies, thanked Mr. Patterson, and left without giving them the satisfaction of acknowledging their presence. The walk back to the small cabin she shared with her aunt took her past the whitewashed church, where those same young women would gather after Sunday service, waiting for young men to notice them. Grace had stopped attending months ago, tired of sitting alone while everyone else paired off for the social hour. Her aunt had been disappointed, but not surprised. Disappointment seemed to be the prevailing emotion in Grace's life. Aunt Martha was tending her vegetable garden when Grace arrived, her weathered hands working the soil with practiced efficiency. She had taken Grace in after both her parents died of fever when Grace was 16, giving her a home when no one else would. Grace owed her everything, which made what she was about to propose feel like betrayal. "Aunt Martha, I saw a posting for a housekeeper position at her ranch north of town." Her aunt sat back on her heels, wiping her forehead with the back of one hand. "The Everett place? You know it?" "Know of it. Big operation from what I hear. The man runs it alone mostly, has some hired hands during busy seasons. Martha's eyes, still sharp despite her 60 years, studied Grace carefully. That is a live-in position. I know. You want to leave. It was not a question, but Grace answered anyway. I cannot keep living like this. Every day in town is just another reminder that I do not fit anywhere. Maybe out there, away from everyone, I could just be useful instead of unwanted. Martha stood slowly, her joints creaking with the effort. She crossed to Grace and took her face in both soil-stained hands. Child, you have never been unwanted to me, but I understand. Lord knows I understand wanting to escape small minds and smaller mercies. She kissed Grace's forehead. If this is what you need, then you go with my blessing. But promise me, you will not let those cruel fools make you believe you are less than you are. Grace felt tears burn behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. I promise. 2 days later, Grace loaded her few possessions into the wagon she borrowed from her aunt's neighbor and set out for the Everett ranch. The journey took her through rolling hills dotted with oak trees, past streams still running high with snowmelt from the distant Sierra Nevada. It was beautiful country, wild and open in a way that made her chest expand with something close to hope. The ranch came into view as she crested a final hill. It was larger than she had expected, with a sturdy 2-story house, a massive barn, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals that currently held maybe 40 head of cattle. Everything looked well maintained, but had a certain emptiness about it, as though waiting for more life than one person could provide. Grace pulled the wagon up to the main house and climbed down, her simple brown dress already dusty from the journey. She had barely made it to the porch steps when the front door opened and a man emerged. Owen Everett was not what she expected. Somewhere in his late 20s, he stood well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His hair was dark brown, nearly black and too long, falling past his collar. But it was his face that caught her attention, specifically the left side of it. A scar ran from his temple down to his jaw, puckered and angry even though it appeared to be years old. It pulled the corner of his left eye slightly downward and twisted his mouth into what looked like a permanent grimace on that side. He studied her with eyes the color of creek water, green-brown and unreadable. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. "You are here about the position," he finally said. His voice was deep and rough as though he did not use it often. "Yes, sir. Grace Garrett. Owen Everett." He came down the steps, moving with a slight limp that matched the damaged side of his face. Up close, she could see more scars on his left hand and forearm, disappearing under his rolled-up sleeve. "You have experience keeping house." "I have been running my aunt's household for 6 years. I can cook, clean, mend, preserve food, tend a vegetable garden, and handle basic animal care if needed." "Why do you want this position?" The directness of the question startled her into honesty. "Because I want to be somewhere I can be useful without being reminded daily that I am not decorative enough to matter." Something shifted in his expression, too quick to name but unmistakably recognition. He nodded slowly. "I pay $30 a month plus room and board." "You would have the room on the first floor, back of the house. Work is 7 days a week, but I am not unreasonable about time for yourself. I keep to myself mostly, and I expect the same. I do not need conversation, just good food and clean clothes and someone to help maintain this place." "That arrangement suit you?" "Yes, sir." "Then the job is yours if you want it." Grace blinked. "You do not want references or to know more about me. Can you do the work you claimed?" "Yes." "Then I do not need to know anything else. People's pasts and reasons are their own business." He gestured toward the house. I will help you bring your things inside. You can start tomorrow. Today, just get yourself settled." He moved toward her wagon before she could respond, lifting her trunk as though it weighed nothing despite his limp. Grace followed with her smaller bags, her mind trying to catch up with how quickly her life had just changed. The room he showed her was at the back of the house, small but clean, with a real bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking a meadow that ran down to a creek. It was more than she had dared hope for. Her throat felt tight as she set her bags down. Kitchen is in the front of the house. There is a root cellar out back and a smokehouse beyond that. I will show you where everything is in the morning. For tonight, there is leftover stew in the kitchen if you are hungry." He paused in the doorway, his damaged profile toward her. "Welcome to the ranch, Miss Garrett." "Thank you, Mr. Everett." After he left, Grace sat on the bed and let herself feel the full weight of the day. She was alone in a strange place with a scarred, taciturn man she did not know, and somehow she felt safer than she had in years. The first weeks passed in a rhythm of work that Grace found deeply satisfying. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, usually biscuits and bacon with eggs from the chickens she quickly learned to tend. Owen ate without comment, then disappeared for the day to work the ranch. She spent her mornings cleaning, mending, and cooking, her afternoons in the vegetable garden or preserving food, and her evenings preparing supper. Owen spoke little, but Grace began to notice things about him. He read in the evenings, actual books rather than just newspapers, and his shelves held an eclectic collection ranging from Shakespeare to agricultural manuals. He was meticulous about the ranch, never letting anything fall into disrepair. He was gentle with the horses despite his imposing size. And he never, not once, made her feel uncomfortable or threatened. More surprisingly, he never stared at her appearance with either pity or disdain. He looked at her the same way he looked at everything else on his ranch, with calm assessment of function rather than form. A month into her employment, Grace was working in the vegetable garden when she heard a wagon approaching. Two women climbed down, both dressed in the kind of finery that marked them as town ladies on a social call. Grace recognized the type immediately and felt her defenses rise. "Hello there," the older woman called, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she took in Grace's dirt-stained dress and sun-darkened skin. "We are looking for Mr. Everett. Is he available? He is checking the north fence line. Can I give him a message?" "Oh, well." The woman exchanged a glance with her companion. "We are from the ladies' auxiliary in town. We like to welcome newcomers and make sure everyone has what they need. I am Mrs. Dorothy Henderson, and this is my daughter, Lillian." Grace wiped her hands on her apron. "Grace Garrett. I am Mr. Everett's housekeeper." "How lovely." Lillian stepped forward, her blue eyes sharp with curiosity. "We had heard Mr. Everett had hired someone. You must find it rather lonely out here, just the two of you." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Grace felt her jaw tighten. "I find the work suits me just fine." Of course, of course." Mrs. Henderson's smile grew more brittle. "We just wanted to extend an invitation to the church social next month. It is important to maintain proper Christian fellowship, even in remote locations. Both of you would be most welcome, naturally. I will mention it to Mr. Everett. Please do. We would be so delighted to have him join us. Such a shame, a man like that living out here all alone." Lillian's gaze swept over Grace dismissively. "He must get terribly lonesome for proper society." Before Grace could respond, Owen's voice cut across the yard. "Mrs. Henderson, Miss Henderson." He approached from the barn, his long stride eating up the distance. His face was carefully neutral, but Grace caught tension in his shoulders she had never seen before. "Mr. Everett, how wonderful to see you." Mrs. Henderson beamed at him. We were just extending an invitation to you and your housekeeper for the church social. It has been far too long since you have joined us in town. I thank you for the invitation, but I am content here." His tone was polite but final. "Surely you cannot mean to deprive yourself of all society. A man needs community, especially living so far from town. And dear Lillian here was just saying how she hoped to see you again. You two got on so well at the Christmas gathering." Lillian blushed on cue, a delicate pink that highlighted her porcelain complexion. Grace had seen this performance before, though never directed at Owen. She waited for him to soften, to show interest, to respond the way men always did to beautiful women seeking their attention. "Miss Henderson is a charming young lady, I am sure," Owen said, "but I am not in the market for society or anything else. I prefer my solitude. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to return to. Good day, ladies." He turned and walked toward the barn without another word. Grace watched the Henderson women's faces cycle through shock, embarrassment, and finally indignation. "Well," Mrs. Henderson sniffed, "I suppose some people do not appreciate kindness when it is offered. Come along, Lillian." They climbed back into their wagon with much rustling of skirts and wounded dignity. As they drove away, Lillian glanced back at Grace with such pure venom that it actually made Grace step back. Owen emerged from the barn once the wagon was out of sight. "They bother you much?" "Just trying to put me in my place, I suppose." "Which is what, exactly?" Grace looked at him in surprise. "Beneath them. Beneath their notice except as a curiosity or a warning of what happens to plain women. They are fools." He said it as simple fact, not comfort. "You are worth 10 of women like that. You work hard, you are honest, and you do not play games. That has value. Beauty is just a mask people wear. It tells you nothing about what is underneath." He walked past her toward the house, leaving Grace standing in the garden with her heart beating too fast and her eyes stinging. In all her life, no one had ever defended her that way. No one had ever suggested she had value beyond her function. That night at supper, Owen was quieter than usual. Grace served the beef stew and fresh bread, then sat across from him as had become their custom. For a while, the only sound was silverware on plates. "That scar," Grace said suddenly, surprising herself. "Can I ask what happened?" Owen's hand went unconsciously to his face, tracing the puckered line. "Fire, when I was 20. A barn caught light and I went in to get the horses out. A beam fell. That was brave. That was stupid. I was lucky to survive. Lucky I did not lose my eye. Lucky a traveling doctor happened to be nearby to stitch me up, or I probably would have died from infection." He took a drink of water. "Changed everything, though. The woman I was planning to marry took one look at my face after and could not hide her horror. She tried, give her credit, but I saw the truth. Saw it in everyone's eyes, actually. The pity, the revulsion, the relief that it was not them. People are cruel when faced with anything that makes them uncomfortable. Yes, they are, but I learned something useful from it. I learned who really mattered. My parents, before they passed, they did not care. A few real friends, they stayed. Everyone else fell away, and I realized I did not miss them, did not need them. Out here, alone, I could just be myself without constantly seeing my damage reflected in other people's reactions." Grace nodded slowly. "That is why you did not hesitate to hire me, why you did not care that I am not pretty. I hired you because you were honest and direct. And for what it is worth, Miss Garrett, I do not find you unpretty. You have an interesting face, strong and expressive. You have capable hands and clear eyes. You carry yourself with dignity despite the world trying to take it from you. That is its own kind of beauty, though most people are too blind to see it." Grace felt heat rise in her cheeks. She was not used to compliments, even ones as practical as Owen's. "Thank you. Just the truth. No point in lying. Spring turned to summer, and Grace settled into ranch life with a contentment she had never known. The work was hard, but it was also fulfilling. She expanded the vegetable garden, started making cheese from the milk cow, and slowly began to make the house into something warmer than the bachelor's quarters it had been. Owen remained reserved, but small intimacies began to develop between them. She learned he liked his coffee strong and his bread slightly burned. He learned she hummed while she worked and had a talent for making something good out of whatever ingredients were available. They began to take meals together consistently, and sometimes in the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the hills, not talking but companionably quiet. Grace found herself noticing things about Owen that had nothing to do with his scar. The way his rare smiles transformed his face, the intelligence in his eyes when he talked about ranch management or the books he read, the gentleness in his hands when he handled animals or repaired something delicate. The way he treated her with consistent respect, never making her feel lesser or unwanted. She was falling in love with him. She realized one July evening while watching him fix a broken fence post. The realization terrified her. Nothing in her life had prepared her for this feeling, this wanting to be near someone, to know their thoughts, to make them smile. She had no practice in love, no confidence that she could possibly inspire it in return, but the feeling grew anyway, unwanted and irrepressible as weeds. August brought the county fair to Oroville, and Owen surprised her by suggesting they attend. "Need to show some of our cattle, and you should take a day away from the ranch. Plus, you have been talking about that fabric shipment the mercantile is supposed to get in. This would be your chance to see it." Grace agreed, more excited than she wanted to admit. She wore her best dress, a simple gray affair that did nothing for her complexion but was at least clean and pressed. Owen wore his own church clothes, a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and made him look almost dangerous. The fair was crowded, full of people from all the surrounding ranches and farms. Grace felt the familiar prickle of judgment as people's eyes slid over her and dismissed her, but with Owen beside her, it bothered her less. He seemed oblivious to the stares his face drew, focused entirely on the practical business of checking in his cattle and collecting the entry paperwork. Grace Garrett, is that you?" She turned to see Sarah Mitchell, one of the few girls who had been kind to her in school before life had separated them. Sarah looked prosperous and happy, her dress well made and her face bright. "Sarah, it has been a long time. Too long. I heard you left town, but I did not know where you had gone. Are you well?" Sarah's eyes flicked to Owen with open curiosity. "Very well. I am working as a housekeeper at Mr. Everett's ranch." Owen Everett. I did not realize anyone worked for him. Most folks think he is practically a hermit. She lowered her voice. "Is he good to you? Some people say strange things about men who live alone like that. People say strange things about everything. He is a fair employer and a good man." Grace kept her voice firm. "Well, I am glad you are doing well, truly. You should come to the quilting circle sometime. We meet twice a month at the church." "Maybe I will." She would not, but Sarah meant well. They parted with promises to stay in touch that both knew were empty. Owen returned to her side, handing her a stick of peppermint candy without comment. "Your friend from school. She is kind but curious. People usually are." He glanced around the crowded fairgrounds. "Want to see the exhibitions? Or would you rather head to the mercantile? Could we see the exhibitions? I have never been to a county fair before." His expression softened. "Lead the way, then." They spent the afternoon wandering through displays of prize vegetables, elaborate quilts, and preserved goods. Grace found herself genuinely enjoying the day, especially when Owen won her a hair ribbon by hitting all the targets at the shooting gallery. It was blue, completely impractical, and she treasured it immediately. As evening approached, music started up near the main pavilion. Couples began forming for a dance, and Grace felt her good mood dim slightly. This was the part where men found pretty partners and plain women stood to the side, watching. "Want to dance?" Owen asked. She stared at him. "What, dance? That thing people do when there is music. I am not particularly good at it, but I know the basic steps. You do not have to do that." "I know. I want to." He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His hand was warm and calloused and completely engulfed hers. He led her to the edge of the dancing area, away from the worst of the crowd, and pulled her into a simple waltz position. He was right that he was not particularly good, but neither was she. They moved together awkwardly at first, learning each other's rhythm. Grace was intensely aware of his hand on her waist, the solid presence of him, the way he looked at her with complete focus as though she was the only person in the entire fair. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Because I wanted to dance with you. Is that all right?" "People are staring. Let them. They are probably wondering what a man like you is doing with a woman like me." Owen's jaw tightened. "A man like me? You mean scarred and damaged?" "No, I meant good and decent." His steps faltered for a moment. When he resumed, his hand had tightened on her waist, pulling her slightly closer. "Grace, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right time, the right words, but there probably are not any. So I am just going to say it plain. These months with you, they have been the best I have had since before my accident. You make the house feel like a home. You make every day better just by being in it. I look forward to meals because I get to sit across from you. I find excuses to come back to the house early just to talk to you. I am in love with you, and I know that is probably unwelcome and complicated because I am your employer, but I could not keep pretending I was not feeling it." Grace's feet stopped moving entirely. Around them, other couples swept past, but she was frozen, staring up into Owen's face. "You love me." "Yes, but I am not beautiful. I am not charming or graceful or any of the things that make men fall in love. You are all of those things to me. You are beautiful in every way that matters. You are strong and capable and kind. You are genuine. You do not play games or manipulate. When you smile, it is real and it transforms your whole face. When you laugh, which is not often enough, it is the best sound I have ever heard. I love your hands and your directness and the way you hum while you cook. I love that you never made me feel like a monster because of this scar. I love everything about you." Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks, hot and unexpected. "I love you too. I have loved you for months, but I thought it was hopeless. I thought you could never feel that way about someone like me. Someone like you. You mean someone genuine and beautiful and perfect." She laughed through her tears. "I am not perfect, neither am I, but maybe we are perfect for each other." He kissed her then, right there at the edge of the dance floor with half of Oroville watching. Grace did not care. For the first time in her life, she felt chosen, wanted, loved exactly as she was. They left the fair shortly after, both eager to return to the ranch and the privacy it offered. The wagon ride home felt charged with new energy, new possibility. Owen held her hand the entire way, his thumb tracing circles on her palm that made her breath catch. Back at the ranch, they sat together on the porch as the stars came out. "What happens now?" Grace asked. "I suppose that depends on what you want." "I want this. I want you. I want to stay here and build a life if that is what you want too. It is all I want. Marry me, Grace. Make this your home permanently. Be my partner in everything." "Yes," she said, the word coming out fierce and certain. "Yes." They married 3 weeks later in the small church in Oroville with only Aunt Martha and a handful of others present. Grace wore a new dress in deep green that Martha had helped her make, and Owen wore his suit with a new tie. The ceremony was simple, but when they said their vows, Grace felt the weight and truth of every word. Mrs. Henderson and her daughter attended, though they looked as though they had smelled something foul the entire time. Grace saw Lillian whisper something to another young woman that made them both laugh behind their hands. A few months ago, that would have destroyed her. Now, with Owen's hand steady in hers, it simply did not matter. After the ceremony back at the ranch, Owen carried her over the threshold as tradition dictated. He set her down gently in the middle of the parlor, his hands lingering at her waist. "Are you happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good. That is all I want, to make you happy." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, two people learning each other without pretense or performance. Owen treated her with such reverence that Grace cried again, overwhelmed by the reality of being loved. He kissed away her tears and told her she was beautiful until she almost believed it. In the morning, Grace woke wrapped in her husband's arms, sunlight streaming through the window of what was now their shared bedroom. Owen was already awake, watching her with an expression so soft it made her heart ache. Morning, wife. Morning, husband. They lay there grinning at each other like fools until practical necessity drove them out of bed. There were still chores to do, a ranch to run, a life to build. But everything felt different now, brighter and more full of possibility. The months that followed established new rhythms. Grace continued her household work, but now Owen often joined her for tasks, turning chores into opportunities for conversation and stolen kisses. They worked together in the garden, repaired fence together, took evening rides together to check on the cattle. Grace had never known partnership could feel like this, like doubling her strength rather than diminishing it. Autumn came, painting the hills in gold and rust. Grace realized she had missed her monthly courses twice and felt a flutter of nerves and excitement. She waited until she was certain before telling Owen one evening after supper, "I think I am with child." His face went through several emotions quickly: shock, joy, fear, settling finally on wonder. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be, maybe 3 months along." He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "Grace, I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure. I never thought I would have this, a wife and a family. I thought I would always be alone." "You have given me everything. You gave me everything first. You saw me when no one else would. I saw you because you were worth seeing." Winter arrived with unusual force, bringing snow that blanketed the ranch in white. Grace grew rounder, her pregnancy showing clearly now. Owen became almost comically protective, insisting she rest more, doing tasks she had always handled. She found it equal parts frustrating and endearing. On a particularly cold January night, Grace went into labor 3 weeks earlier than expected. Owen rode through a snowstorm to fetch the midwife from town, pushing his horse faster than was safe but driven by desperation. By the time he returned with the midwife, Grace was already deep into her labor, her face pale with pain and effort. The midwife was a capable woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered most of the babies in the county for the past 20 years. She examined Grace efficiently and announced that everything was progressing normally, if quickly for a first birth. Owen stayed with Grace despite Mrs. Chen's suggestion that he might prefer to wait outside. He held her hand through every contraction, wiped her face with cool cloths, and told her she was strong and brave and doing beautifully. Grace crushed his fingers and yelled at him twice, but mostly she drew strength from his steady presence. As dawn broke on a cold February morning in 1883, Grace delivered a healthy baby boy. Mrs. Chen placed the squalling infant on Grace's chest, and Grace looked down at the tiny, red, furious face with overwhelming love. "He is perfect," she whispered. Owen, who had tears streaming openly down his face, touched the baby's small hand with one finger. "He is incredible. You are incredible." They named him James Owen Everett, and he changed everything. The house that had been quiet now filled with baby cries and laughter. Grace marveled at how naturally motherhood came to her, how fiercely she could love this small person. Owen was equally smitten, spending every free moment with his son, talking to him about the ranch and reading aloud from his books. When spring came and the snow melted, Grace bundled James up and took him into town for the first time. She needed supplies and refused to let fear keep her isolated. The response was mixed. Some women cooed appropriately over the baby and congratulated her. Others, including Mrs. Henderson and Lillian, offered stiff politeness that barely concealed their bitter disappointment that Grace had achieved what they thought should be impossible for someone like her. Grace found she did not care about their opinions anymore. She had everything that mattered: a husband who adored her, a beautiful son, a home that was truly hers. The rest was just noise. Time passed in the way it does on a ranch, marked by seasons and growth. James learned to walk, then to talk, his personality emerging as a perfect blend of Grace's directness and Owen's gentleness. When he was 2, Grace became pregnant again, delivering a daughter they named Sarah Martha, after her childhood friend and her aunt. Aunt Martha visited regularly, her joy in Grace's happiness evident in every word and gesture. "You have built something beautiful here," she told Grace one summer afternoon while they watched the children play in the yard. "I always knew you had it in you, but I am glad you found someone who could see it too. He did not just see it, he made me believe it was real." The ranch prospered under Owen and Grace's joint management. Grace's practical skills complemented Owen's ranching knowledge, and together they expanded the operation, adding more cattle and even some horses. They hired seasonal workers when needed, and Grace made sure everyone was fed well and treated fairly. The ranch became known as a good place to work, and they never lacked for help when they needed it. When James was 5 and Sarah 3, Grace discovered she was pregnant again. This one was harder, her body tired from 2 previous pregnancies and the constant work of ranch life. Owen insisted she rest more, taking over many of her usual tasks himself, and hiring a young woman from town to help with the housework. On a warm September evening in 1888, Grace delivered twin boys after a long and difficult labor. They named them Robert and William, and suddenly the house was full to bursting with noise and life and chaos. Owen, now in his mid-30s with silver threading through his dark hair, handled the mayhem with surprising grace. He had become more comfortable with himself over the years, his scar just another part of his face rather than a defining feature. He laughed more easily now, smiled more often, and had lost the hunted, lonely look he had worn when Grace first met him. The children grew up knowing nothing but love and acceptance. Grace made sure of that, determined that they would never feel the crushing weight of judgment she had endured. She taught them to value character over appearance, kindness over beauty, substance over style. James, tall and serious even as a child, loved working with his father on the ranch. Sarah inherited Grace's practical nature and her father's love of books, a combination that made her formidable even at a young age. The twins were wild and energetic, 2 peas in a pod who seemed to communicate without words. When James turned 10, Lillian Henderson, now married to a banker and living in Sacramento, visited Oroville, and made a point of stopping by the ranch. Grace invited her in out of politeness, though she could not imagine what the woman wanted. Lillian looked around the comfortable, lived-in house with its toys scattered about and children's laughter echoing from upstairs. Her expression was complicated, a mixture of envy and resignation. "You have done well for yourself," she finally said. "I would not have predicted it, but you have." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you came to say?" "No, I came to apologize." The word seemed to pain her. "I was cruel to you years ago, more than once. I saw you as beneath me because you did not have the looks or grace that I valued. I mocked you and dismissed you, and I am sorry." "What prompted this change of heart?" "Honestly, my husband is having an affair with his secretary. Apparently, I am not beautiful enough anymore, not now that I am 30 and have had 3 children. The very things I valued, the things I thought made me better than you, they turned out to be temporary and ultimately meaningless. Meanwhile, you found real love with a good man and you built this life. So yes, I am apologizing, and I am also asking how you did it." Grace felt an unexpected wave of compassion. "I stopped trying to be what others wanted and started being who I actually am. I found someone who valued that instead of some impossible standard of beauty, and I stopped letting people like you define my worth." Lillian flinched but nodded. "I suppose I deserved that." "You did. But I appreciate the apology nonetheless. I hope things improve for you." After Lillian left, Owen found Grace in the kitchen, staring out the window at the land they had built together. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "You all right?" "More than all right. Just reflecting on how much has changed, how much I have changed." "You have not changed, you just finally got to become fully yourself." She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, I do not say it enough. You show it every day, that is more than enough." He kissed her softly. "But I never get tired of hearing it." The years continued their march. The children grew older, each developing their own personalities and dreams. James proved to be a natural rancher, already helping his father with serious tasks by the time he was 15. Sarah announced she wanted to be a teacher, determined to go to the women's college in San Francisco, despite the challenges that would present. The twins, now 10, were still inseparable, and had announced they wanted to join the army together when they were old enough, a prospect that terrified Grace but also made her proud. Grace herself, now in her early 40s, had grown into her role as wife, mother, and ranch partner with a confidence she never could have imagined in her youth. The lines on her face were earned from laughter and sun, not bitterness. Her hands were still work-roughened, her frame still angular, but she carried herself with the assurance of a woman who knew her own worth. Owen, touched by gray and slowed slightly by old injuries, loved her with the same steady devotion he always had. If anything, their bond had deepened over the years, tempered by shared trials and joys into something unbreakable. One evening in the spring of 1893, they sat on the porch as they had countless times before, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and pink. The sounds of their children playing in the yard drifted to them on the warm breeze. "Do you ever regret it?" Grace asked suddenly. "Marrying me instead of someone beautiful like Lillian?" Owen turned to her with genuine surprise. "Where is this coming from?" "I do not know. I suppose seeing her again made me think about the roads not taken." "Grace, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "Every single day of my life with you has been a gift. You are beautiful inside and out, though you still refuse to believe me when I say it. You are the strongest person I know. You have given me 4 incredible children and a home full of love and laughter. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. There is no other road I wanted to take. This life with you is everything." even though I am not pretty. You are gorgeous. You have always been gorgeous. The world was just too blind and stupid to see it. But I saw it the day you drove up in that wagon, all defiant courage and desperate hope. I saw it every day after. I see it now. And I will see it when we are old and gray and sitting on this porch together at 80, still watching the sunset. Grace felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. Promise, promise. James left for college at 18, heading to Berkeley to study agriculture science with plans to return and help expand the ranch. Sarah followed 2 years later, determined to make her mark as an educator. The twins proved themselves serious about the military, joining up together the day they turned 18 in 1896. The house felt emptier with the children gone, but Grace and Owen adjusted. They had more time for each other, more quiet evenings reading together or taking long rides through the land they loved. Grace expanded her cheese-making operation, and her products became sought after throughout the county. Owen began mentoring young ranchers, sharing the knowledge he had accumulated over decades. They became pillars of the community despite their initial desire for solitude, known for their fairness, generosity, and the genuine love they so clearly shared. People stopped seeing them as the scarred rancher and the plain housekeeper who somehow ended up together. They were simply Owen and Grace Everett, a partnership that worked. In 1899, James returned from college with a degree and a wife, a lovely woman named Catherine who fell in love with ranch life immediately. They moved into a new house Owen and Grace had built on the property, and James took over more of the daily ranch operations. His first child, a daughter, was born that winter, making Grace a grandmother at 42. Sarah returned from San Francisco in 1901, not with a teaching degree but with a husband who was a doctor. They settled in Oroville, where he established a practice, and she started a school for children whose families could not afford the regular tuition. Grace and Owen supported them both financially and emotionally, proud of the woman their daughter had become. The twins came home on leave whenever they could, full of stories and adventures that made Grace alternately proud and terrified. They were fine young men, strong and brave, and they credited their parents with teaching them the values that guided them. As the new century dawned, Grace and Owen found themselves entering their later years with grace and gratitude. The ranch thrived under James's management while Owen provided wisdom and experience. Grace spent her days tending her garden, making cheese, and spoiling her grandchildren, who were arriving with increasing frequency as their children started families of their own. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1903, Owen surprised Grace with a portrait session with a traveling photographer. She protested that she was too old, too plain, that photographs would just show all her flaws. Owen insisted, and finally she agreed. When the photographs arrived weeks later, Grace stared at them in shock. The woman looking back at her from those images was not the awkward, harsh-featured girl she remembered from her youth. This woman had character written in every line of her face. She looked strong, capable, content. Beside her, Owen's scarred profile seemed distinguished rather than damaged, and the way he looked at her in the photos captured such obvious love that it made her throat tight. "See," Owen said, looking over her shoulder. "I told you, beautiful." Grace leaned back against her husband, finally allowing herself to believe him. The years that followed were peaceful, marked by the ordinary joys and sorrows of life. They lost Aunt Martha in 1905, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83. Grace grieved but was grateful for the years they had shared, and for her aunt's unwavering support when she needed it most. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new life. Grace taught them to garden and cook and stand up for themselves. Owen taught them to ride and work hard and treat everyone with respect. Together, they created a legacy of love that extended far beyond their immediate family. In 1908, Sarah gave birth to a daughter she named Grace, and when they placed the baby in Grace's arms, she felt the circle complete. This child would grow up knowing she was loved, valued for who she was rather than how she looked. She would never know the crushing rejection and loneliness that had defined her grandmother's youth. That alone felt like victory. Owen's health began to decline in his early 50s, his old injuries catching up with him. He moved more slowly, tired more easily, but his mind stayed sharp, and his love for Grace never wavered. She cared for him as tenderly as he had always cared for her, their roles reversing naturally as need arose. On a warm evening in September 1912, they sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Owen was 70 now, his hair white and his face deeply lined. Grace was 55, gray-haired and grandmotherly, but still strong and vital. 30 years, Owen said, taking her hand. 30 years since you drove up that road, looking like you expected the world to kick you again. And you gave me a home instead. We gave each other a home. We built this together. I never thanked you properly, you know, for seeing me when no one else would, for loving me when I could not love myself. You thank me every day by being exactly who you are, by loving me back, by making this life with me. He kissed her knuckles, his lips dry and warm. I am so grateful that those fools in town were too blind to see your worth. If they had not rejected you, you might never have found your way here. Everything happened exactly as it should. Yes, it did. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the sun set over the land they loved. The sounds of their grandchildren playing drifted from James's house nearby. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. Everything smelled like grass and dust and home. I love you, Grace Everett. I love you, Owen Everett. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will finally believe you are beautiful, that you will stop seeing yourself through the eyes of those cruel people from your past. When you look in the mirror, I want you to see what I see. A gorgeous, strong, wonderful woman who made my entire life worthwhile. Grace felt tears slip down her cheeks. After all these years, he was still trying to convince her. And finally, maybe she was ready to believe. I promise to try. That is all I ask. The years continued, gentler now but still good. Owen's health stabilized and they enjoyed several more years of companionable peace. They celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1923 with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. A sprawling celebration that lasted an entire weekend. Grace was 63 now, Owen 78. They moved more slowly, forgot things occasionally, but the love between them had only intensified with time. They had become that couple people pointed to as proof that real love existed, that partnership could last, that beauty truly was more than skin deep. When Owen finally passed in his sleep one winter night in 1925, Grace held his hand and told him she loved him one last time. She grieved deeply, the loss of her partner leaving a hole nothing could fill. But she did not break. Owen had taught her she was strong enough to withstand anything, and she proved him right. She lived another 15 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She saw Sarah's daughter Grace grow up to become a lawyer, fighting for women's rights. She saw James expand the ranch into one of the most successful operations in California. She saw the twins retire from the military with honors and settle nearby with their families. She saw, finally, her own worth reflected in the lives she had touched and the love she had shared. On her deathbed in 1940, surrounded by family. She thought of the lonely girl who had been rejected for her lack of beauty, and the rancher who had seen beauty no mirror could reflect. She thought of the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. "I was beautiful," she whispered to her daughter Sarah, who held her hand. "He made me see it. I was always beautiful." "You were, Mama. You are, always." Grace Garrett Everett died peacefully at age 80, loved and mourned by dozens of descendants who all carried forward the lessons she and Owen had taught. That true beauty lives in character, that love is built on respect and partnership, and that the world's judgments matter far less than how you treat each other. The ranch continued under James's children and grandchildren, a testament to what two lonely people had built together. In the family cemetery on a hillside overlooking the land they loved, two headstones stood side by side. Owen Everett and Grace Garrett Everett, beloved husband and wife, together forever. And if you visited that cemetery on a warm evening when the sun painted the hills in gold, you might almost feel their presence, still sitting together, still watching the sunset, still holding hands after all these years. Because some love is so strong it transcends death itself, echoing forward through generations, proving that beauty really does live in the soul, and that those who can see it are the luckiest people alive. The story of Grace and Owen became family legend, told to children and grandchildren as proof that the world's standards mean nothing compared to genuine connection. In a time and place where appearance was currency and judgment was swift, two damaged souls found each other and built something beautiful that lasted generations. They were rejected by a world that valued the wrong things. But in each other they found acceptance, love, and a beauty that never faded because it came from within. And that, in the end, was the only beauty that ever really mattered.